Hello, I'm Clyde Buchan, and today I'm just going to do a little update on my dissertation, where I'm looking to evaluate the multiple benefits of urban flood alleviation with a particular case study in northeast Scotland in Elgin. So, a coupling of more frequent high rainfall events and urban growth is increasing the need for urban flood alleviation schemes. Whilst the primary focus of such schemes is flood mitigation, the spaces designated for this are predominantly under non-flood conditions. There should thus be a focus on maximising the social, economic and environmental benefits provided during these regular conditions, particularly during the design phase of any project. This usually promotes the use of blue-green infrastructure, which, if used correctly, has the potential to provide multiple ecosystem services. However, there has been a lack of emphasis from decision makers to switch to these fully sustainable alternatives, in part due to the limited quantitative studies of such practices. Here on the right is a feedback loop where understanding of functioning of current schemes can act to maximise benefits of future schemes. The literature also identifies a need to compare the multiple benefits of blue-green infrastructure and more traditional grey infrastructure. So that's the broader picture. To do this, I'm choosing to focus on Elgin Flood Alleviation Scheme. Elgin is a town in the northeast of Scotland, built on the banks of the River Lossy. Over the years, it's been significantly impacted by flooding. For the 50 years prior to 2010, it averaged one flood event every 5 years. This prompted the development of Elgin Flood Alleviation Scheme, built between 2011 and 2016. This aims to bring this up to a 1 in 200 year flood defence standard now required across Scotland. So there's several reasons why I've chosen Elgin Flood Alleviation Scheme as my case study. Firstly, it's the most expensive flood alleviation scheme in Scotland at £86 million, and the largest civil engineering project in the Moray constituency. However, evaluations of this have been limited to cost-benefit evaluations, which often fail to acknowledge social and environmental benefits. Importantly, for my purposes, the scheme consists of a wide range of infrastructure types, spanning from fully green infrastructure, consisting of floodplains and embankments like here at Burgh Briggs, to grey infrastructure such as bridge widening and channel diversion, use of flood walls, and finally hybrid infrastructure, using a mix of that green and grey infrastructure. So on the more local scale, this project aims to identify the multiple benefits provided by the scheme in the locality. And then I will look to relate this to the wider scale and understand the respective benefits of blue, green, grey and hybrid infrastructure. To achieve these overarching aims, I've broken this down into 3 research questions. 1, can a methodology be developed to successfully identify the multiple benefits of flood management practices? 2, in regards to ecosystem services, has Elgin benefited from the flood alleviation scheme? And 3, how can observed results from this scheme be used to maximise benefits in future flood alleviation schemes? So to answer that first question, I had to come up with a methodology. I started by asking some industry professionals what they thought the most important factors were when designing flood protection schemes. You can see my results here. This gave me a rough idea of the benefits worthwhile studying. To start with, I'm considering these top 6, which are seen as the most important and can be relatively easily quantified. Time permitting, I will work my way down the list. I then identified 5 proxies which take into account those factors. Flood protection, property value, which can look at amenity and economic growth. Green space accessibility looks at that recreation. Habitat connectivity focuses on biodiversity, and then we have carbon sequestration too. These are all measured on different scales, and thus I will use an approach which normalizes these benefits across a quantitative 0 to 10 scale. This is calculated using this benefit curve, which converts characteristic values on the x-axis to a benefit score on the y. By calculating the benefit score before and after the scheme, a benefit uplift can be calculated, and this is what is shown here. These benefits all vary over space too, meaning a GIS method is quite suitable, and the best way to explain this is through an example. So here I'm looking at carbon sequestration. I've taken land cover data for 2007, before the scheme started, and reclassified that land cover type by their average soil carbon concentrations. I've then taken this data and reclassified it into a 0 to 10 scale. Now, for each variable, limits must be set on those values. Here, 0 equates to 0 tons per hectare of soil carbon. You're thinking man-made surfaces there. And 10 equates to 82.3 tons per hectare, which is the greatest soil carbon concentrations identified in the UK. So this provides me with a benefit score spatially across Elgin for 2007, seen on the right here. I then repeated the exact same process for 2017 after the scheme was finished. A reminder then, benefit uplift or change is simply the benefit take away, the after benefit take away the before benefit. Here I've done this with my two previous layers to create my final output. Now, in terms of other layers I've completed, each of them require a slightly different methodology to create those before and after layers, which I've shown on the left here. But then the benefit uplift process remains the same on that 0 to 10 scale. Here I have habitat connectivity change across Elgin, which again uses that land cover data. And then the third factor I've managed to complete is green space accessibility. This is a bit more of a complex methodology, which takes into account that larger green spaces have greater utility and thus a greater travel distance is accepted. All of the values used, though, come from local and more national guidelines, such as Green Space Scotland. Again, that final step is the same: after benefit, take away, before benefit. I've just run through these briefly, but if you'd like to know more about the details behind each factor calculation, I'm happy to take any questions at the end. So that's what I've done in terms of the data analysis so far. Additionally, I have repeated contact with SEPA and the Moray Council, including some semi-structured interviews to gain further context and understanding. Also, being from Elgin, I managed to have a walk along the river a couple of weeks ago when I was home and collect some images and sketches that hopefully I'll be able to use further. For context, here at the top, I have that area of grey infrastructure with new bridge and relief channel. And at the bottom is Boroughbriggs, with lowered floodplains and those embankments running along the top of the picture. My next steps then are to analyse those two other variables, flood protection and property price change, which I am currently working on. And then I'm going to look to take a step back from the quantitative side of things to focus on some qualitative research. I have a few meetings currently lined up with surveyors who are providing my property data, the council flood risk team, and Gordon and MacPhail, a large whisky business in close proximity to the river. I do hope to be in touch with several other businesses, namely Johnson's of Elgin and Glenmurray Distillery, to see how the flood scheme has affected them too. Lastly then, I need to consider that third question. How can observed results from this scheme be used to maximise benefits in future flood alleviation schemes? To do this, I will look to identify relevant areas where benefits have been lost or gained and see how this relates to the infrastructure in place. Now, I could do this by averaging the improvement over a certain area, as I've done on the left here. Again, this is Boroughbriggs. I could then create some sort of profile for that area with each of the benefit scores, and maybe something similar to the figure on the right. But really this is still in progress, and for now I'm concentrating on completing my initial layers. Here I have a rough timetable of when I expect to be completed. Nowhere near my initial timetable, but I'm still confident that I'll be completed in time. So that's a little progress report for you all, and thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to answering your questions.